Oh, good evening. And of course, there was one thing I got to tell you. Now, what was it? Oh, yeah, Happy Valentine's Day. You know, the kind of holiday where you love somebody and you give them a Valentine's and always had to be a heart or something. And for today's Valentine's Day, I'm going to review to you the famous vampire romance franchise, and it's gonna be Twilight versus Vampire Diaries. Oh, in case some of you are going to be asking me, don't get me started of True Blood. I mean, it's an okay series, but why does it always have to put a lot of sex in it? I can't stand romance involving nudity and sexuality. I can't stand that. That's why I prefer to stick with Twilight versus Vampire Diary. Now let's talk about Twilight, shall we? Now, in the story, you get a brand girl who goes by the name of Bella. Her mother and her father had a divorce, so now she lives with her father and meets this vampire boy who goes by the name of Edward. And his family are vampires too, goes by the name of Collins. And to make a long story short, it's the same old cliche romance. You know, girl meets vampire, vampire falls for girl, vampire loves her for who she is, girl wants to be vampire, vampire say no, other vampires want to kill her because she's the only one who got their interest. I mean, heck, I'm not even interested in after Bella at all, because she's so bland. And you know one thing that always kills me the most? Why these vampires sparkle at the sunlight. Now, of course, I don't sparkle at sunlight nor burn. You see, when the sun rises on me, I just lose my powers. And when the sun goes down, my powers come back. That's it. I mean, if you read Bram Stoker's Fable, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But these vampires, they sparkle in the sunlight. They're not vampires. They're offsprings of My Little Ponies. Ain't that an interesting gimmick? My Little Pony, Twilight Pony. I got a Jacob Pony. He sparkle when the sun shine on him. Well, I got a Bella Pony. He is bland. She is bland. Well, I got a Jacob Pony, and he's like a part pony, part wolf. And throughout the entire story, there's other vampires who don't like Bella, and of course, spoiler alert, at the final story, they have a child who is part human, part vampire, and she aged quick. I mean, she grows up really fast. And now other vampires want to destroy her because she gives people visions of the future. All in all, honesty, I don't care much for the Twilight. But the only vampire I do like in the story is, of course, Alice Collins. Compared to all the vampires, she is very feisty and very beautiful. And I like it when she always has visions of the future. Even though they're not completely clear, but she's a very interesting vampire out of the whole bunch. Now enough about Twilight, and now it's time to get on to Vampire Diaries. Throughout the whole story, you get these two vampires who are brothers. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention. The werewolves on Twilight, they're not exactly like werewolves where full moon rises and they turn into wolves. They're Native Americans, and they're more like shapeshifters. They're not exactly werewolves at all, they're just shapeshifters, that's all. But why do they always have to walk around shirtless? Don't they ever wear shirts? Now, in this story here, there's a girl who goes by the name of Elena. she's a very beautiful, and not as bland as Bella. That's for sure. Elena, she's very beautiful, very attractive, and I wish I can have her in my romance. And of course, she's torn between two vampires. One named Stefan, who's a good vampire, and the other one named Damien, who's a bad vampire. And of course there are witches and werewolves involved, and Elena is torn between two vampires, and of course there's a group of vampires who are called Originals, and of course they made a spin-off of that series. It's alright. And throughout the whole story, it's a lot more entertaining than Twilight. I mean, when they're in the sunlight, they burn, plain and simple. And they show their fangs, unlike Twilight, they don't show their fangs. But you know one thing that always bugs me? Why do all these vampires always have to be shirtless? They think every vampire had to be sexy to be shirtless? Let's see. There, you see? Is that sexy? Oh, and in case you're wondering about this scar on my chest, this is what happens when you get staked so many times. It leaves a mark. Well, one thing I have to say, I don't know how these vampires do it, being shirtless and all. I prefer to wear more clothes, but it's not bad. Unlike those vampires from 30 Days and Nights, huh? If you ask me, as a vampire, Vampire Diaries is a lot better series than Twilight. And of course I root for Stefan the most, instead of Damien. Well, I'd rather put on something else. Ugh. Well, this here is my review for the day. Between Twilight and Vampire Diary, I say Vampire Diary is a lot better story than Twilight. So, oh! And of course I have the whole series. Season 1 through 4. And their romance is way better than the Twilight romance. You know, after living my eternal life and multi-voice reviewer, he has a girlfriend, I think it's time for me to get myself into a sort of a Vampire Diary romance. But for right now, I'm very hungry. Excuse me.